Welcome to Torah Smash, the podcast for nerdy Jews, where our lives of Jewish learning collide with our love of nerd culture. In each episode, we discuss what we lovingly call a Torah Smash, which we have defined as a beautiful collision of one thing from the world of Judaism with another from nerd culture. I am RDY, and joining me today are
Barak Malkin,
Ethan Lane Miller.
Today, we are going to talk about Rogue One. You both know that I'm a hot and cold Star Wars fan. When I was a kid, I absolutely loved episodes 4 through 6. The first of the 3 movies I really remember is Return of the Jedi. I was 9 years old, and just about every 9-year-old birthday party that month was at the movie theater to watch Return of the Jedi.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very funny.
Yeah, I saw it like 4 times in 3 weeks. I have a nostalgic love for Star Wars, but my analytical love for it is fading fast. I don't love the movies anymore. It might be because the prequels and sequels were, I know. It might be because the prequels and sequels were terrible. It might be because nearly 40 years later, I'm no longer entertained by the simplicity of the black and white characters doing complete good or complete evil. And I know that in our episode on B'nai Mitzvah, I spoke about watching my children react to the reveal in Empire, but the absolute dumpster fire that was the first 3 and last 3 episodes of Star Wars made me less patient with the middle 3. All that being said, I absolutely love the Jon Favreau stuff, especially The Mandalorian and Andor, and I really, really liked Rogue One. Rogue One is the Star Wars movie we're discussing today. So,
yay.
Have at it, friends. What is the Torah Smash?
Oh, gosh.
Hold on. Wait, you didn't even give us like what the whole movie. Like you just talked about your love of Star Wars and the complication of our understanding when you say first 3, last 3, middle 3, because who knows which ones you're referring to when you say those.
True.
Well, Ethan, you can guess, but I don't even have a direction aside from like a rebellious act.
I want you to think of the entire Star Wars universe and where Rogue One falls in the Star Wars universe. That might be most helpful.
Interesting. All
right,
Ethan, go ahead.
It's
I yield the floor to the expert. Go ahead.
Thank you. So thinking about where it takes place in the Star Wars universe, I assume by where you mean time. And time-wise, it is made in such a way that but when you finish Rogue One, you can put on the original Star Wars. And it's one
right,
seamless, continuous story. I'm thinking through what the Jewish link to it is. Is this like the 5 books, how they like lead into each other?
Oh, interesting. Not where I was going, and they don't always, but
well, if we're talking about where it lands in it, right? There's stuff that happens before, there's stuff that happens after, but the Star Wars timeline is based on the battle of Yavin. Right. What's the terminology, Ethan, for like year 0?
It is before the Battle of Yavin and after the Battle of Yavin.
Yeah, BBY and ABY, right? Similar to how we have BCE and CE. So I'm trying to think of what is that moment for Judaism, and part of me says it's receiving the commandments. And so what's the story right before receiving the commandments, which we've already done, which is Yitro. And that's, I don't think, I theorized early on that we would talk about Yitro a lot, but there's no, maybe I'm going to say Yitro or waiting for the commandments.
I think I love listening to your thought process on that because it was really fascinating. And it was such a hyper-focused deep dive. I'm thinking step back. Don't step quite as far back as Ethan last episode, but step back a little bit and think more vague.
Oh, okay.
Is it? All right, I have an idea. Are the first 3 movies Torah and Rogue One is commentary?
Oh, I would say close enough. Yeah, Ethan's
what I strive for.
Yeah,
Ethan for the win.
What I strive for.
It's Midrash. The concept of Midrash is. I wanted to talk today about Midrash. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what a Midrash is,
it's for my friend. This is for my friend Jason. He's not Jewish, but he's a big fan. So for Jason,
for Jason, Miriam Anzovin, when she was our amazing guest host, said that Midrash were the fan fiction of Torah. which is absolutely 100% correct. And I've stolen that idea a few times, B'Shem Amrato, in her name. But what does that mean? So some people don't know what fan fiction is. So
this one's for Susan.
Right, this one's for Susan. So the word midrash comes from the Hebrew lidrosh, which means to explain. And they are often described as stories that fill in the gaps within the text. There are very often times when the text will have something happening. Famously, the story of Abraham smashing the idols fills in the gap between Abraham's birth at the very end of chapter 11 of Genesis and God tapping Abraham on the shoulder at the very beginning of chapter 12. And yes, I know his name at that point is Abram. So just need to put that out there for our actually listeners.
Shame on you, Rabbi.
And there's also a Talmudic dictum that says you can refer to Abram as Abraham because we know him as Abraham. In between the end of Genesis 11 and the beginning of Genesis 12, something probably happened that made Abraham worthy of God tapping him on the shoulder. And so the story of smashing the idols, where Abraham is watching his father's idol shop, and it's a much longer story than this, but he goes up to one of the idols and he puts a basket of bread in front of it. Then he takes a hammer and smashes all the other idols, and he puts the hammer in the big idol's hand. And his dad gets back home from their trip and says, "What happened to my shop?" And Abraham says, "Well, the big idol was fighting over the bread with the little idols, and he grabbed the hammer and smashed them all." And
all the toys came to life while you were gone, Dad.
Toy Story 0.5. And Abraham's father says that's ridiculous. These can't do that. And Abraham said, "Exactly. They have no power. Why are you doing this?" And God went, this one. So it answers the question, why is Abraham worthy? And there are two types of midrashim. Midrashim is plural for midrash. There are exegetical and homiletical. Exegetical,
you get some SAT points there, Rabbi.
Hey. Exegetical midrashim strictly explain the rules in the Torah. They follow the root of the word explanation. Homiletical midrashim tell a story to answer a question. They all answer a question. So the question that was in all of our heads at the end of Star Wars: A New Hope, episode 4, was, why would the Empire, this ruthless, very particular, ordered organization, why would they leave a flaw in the plans of this big weapon that they're building? And so that question is answered with Rogue One. It was done by a spy.
Ethan, do you know off the top of your head the text for the opening crawl from episode 4?
No, not off
I
the
found
top
it.
of my head.
Let's see if this. I want to see where this fits in. Is it okay, guys?
Well, this is actually a brilliant way to link it together.
Yeah.
So here's, if this is correct, episode 4, A New Hope. Did it say episode 4 when the first one came out?
It did.
So the original theatrical
tangent to a tangent. Yeah.
The original theatrical release, my understanding is it didn't. And as soon as Star Wars blew up, like, I think even within the first theatrical run, Lucas went back and was like, "No, this is episode 4.
That's crazy. All right.
I did not know that.
I think that's true. Someone will actually me if I'm wrong, please.
Can somebody give me the drum noises below my reading? It is a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships, striking from a hidden base, have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire. During the battle, Rebel spies managed to steal secret plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star, an armored space station with enough power to destroy an entire planet. Pursued by the Empire's sinister agents, Princess Leia races home aboard her starship, custodian of the stolen plans that can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy. Yeah, that's so crazy that somebody takes that and then makes a movie.
Yeah, that was the inspiration.
So A New Hope originally hit theaters in 1977, and it wasn't until 1981 that it got the episode 4 marking.
That's so nuts. They just had their first victory against the evil empire, which is the base with the antenna that we just watched.
Yeah.
Not Yavin. The who was in Rogue One, the base that they stole the plans from. That was their Scarif. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. That is their first victory against the Empire, I would say. Yeah. So cool, man. So you think Rogue One's a Midrash? Essentially, yeah.
Oh, it's not that I think Rogue One is a Midrash. It is a Midrash. It serves the purpose of answering the question, what gives? There's this mantra, I am one with the Force and the Force is with me.
Mm-hmm.
Or the Force is with me and I'm one with the Force.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that the friends had swapped it.
Yeah, the friend swapped it. And to me, it's reminiscent of Shema, that reminder of our faith and that chant to remind us who we are and that, that moment to give us strength. So I loved that.
Nice. I was not expecting this. When this movie came out, I had already thought I was actually a very big fan of like the last 30 minutes of episode 3. I think it's a fantastic way of connecting the prequel with the following, because you've got the babies that are born and split to going to their parents. Like that was enough for me as the connecting piece of the story to move forward to episode 4. And then we got Obi-Wan. Now we got Rogue One. Those are now filling the gaps even more than we had before. I don't know what you're going to talk about for this episode, RDY, but I had caught a lot of very subtle missing pieces for episode 4 that were just really nicely hinted at in Rogue One. And so we can get to that. I'll give it to you now. He's giving me like the egging on fingers as if he wants to start a fight. Okay, so things that I caught. 1, there is a spaceship that blows up in Rogue One. It was Red 5, specifically Red 5, which is the one that Luke takes over, like, assumably like a week later, right? Insert of the timeline. There was at the beginning of the thing, there's like a blue squad. There's red team, blue team. Blue team ends up suicide diving, mostly the getting into Scarif and through the gate. So now they do not exist past that. But there's a new Rogue Squad, and so Rogue One is the initialized that new. There's like, I think there's Rogue. I forget what numbers they go, but they have other Rogue Squads then in episode 4, and this one was Rogue One in honor of the people who had given their lives on Scarif to save the Death Star plans. Like there's all these like really seemingly unnecessary little tie-ins to bring us into episode 4.
So my favorite connecting thing, and this is super, super nerdy, but this is the thing that brought me the most joy when I saw the movie for the first time, was that they used a mix of archival footage, like green screened and edited to get Red Leader and Gold Leader into Rogue One. So they used like alternate takes for Red Leader, and for Gold Leader they did the same thing, but the actor who played him was still alive. And so they did this really clever thing where they'd start with him in the cockpit delivering a line from 1977 and then cut away to an exterior, and they would finish the line with new dialogue that he had recorded to make it fit the story of Rogue One. And I knew the moment I watched it, like what was going on. I was like, this is the coolest, absolute coolest thing.
That's fun.
Yeah. And there are a couple of actors on the red team where you can just kind of hear that their voice is familiar, but you don't really know why. So to read up on stuff like that was so much fun. And then like, Peter Cushing and Carrie Fisher, Zichronam Livracha, of blessed memory for Jason, that had their, CGI parts in this. Peter Cushing is Grand Moff Tarkin and Carrie Fisher is Princess Leia. And, R2-D2 and C-3PO with a cameo, and Vader coming in. Vader coming in at the end as a total bad mamma jamma. Like, wow. Just
it was
like
great.
I always get one of the things that annoyed me with the first three, with episodes 1, 2, and 3, was that it seemed a little more high tech than 4, 5, and 6. So like, I know you've got more toys to play with in the modern world when you're making the movie, but the characters still need to keep their tech. So I like that Rogue One kept to that. Like Rogue One kept it in the world that we know, but that little bit of like Darth Vader doing stuff we'd never really seen him do before was super fun, because he could do it before, we just didn't know.
It was like his best. It was like all of his top hits. Like he did pretty much everything we've ever seen him done in any movie in that one hallway.
For sure. Yeah. And yeah,
Darth Vader's greatest hits coming to a
Darth
hallway near
Vader's
you.
greatest hit. But let's listen to the soundtrack for Darth Vader's greatest hits. It goes. The director, Gareth Edwards, has a cameo in it.
As what?
So he's the rebel soldier who disengages from the admiral's ship. So it's minor. Of course, the line that K2SO says, "I have a bad feeling about this."
Yeah, and he says, "Enough, quiet." Cuts him right.
There's like this juggernaut tank.
Yep.
That Jin is being transported on. So the planet is called Wabani, which is an anagram of Obi-Wan. And it also looks like an Imperial version of the Revenge of the Sith tank from the Wookiee planet.
Yes.
So lots of stuff being thrown in there.
There's so to further these connections, RDY, if we think about when this movie came out, I don't mean the Star Wars universe, I mean our real life universe. This was in the middle of Star Wars Rebels airing, and something very smart that they did, which is right up there with how excited I was to see Red Leader and Gold Leader, was they put in connections to Rebels, which at this point was still airing, and in the Star Wars timeline was slowly leading into Rogue One. And so on the Rebel side of things, we see the heroes discovering things that we, the viewers, understand. Oh my gosh, they're so close to discovering the Death Star, but they don't. They just see these little things that we as the audience interpret and understand. The Empire is building the Death Star and they're getting close. And in Rogue One, there are 3 things. One is we see the Ghost, which is the ship. They built a CG model for it and put it in. And so you see it parked outside, and then you also see it in the battle scenes. Over the comms, you hear a comm message for General Syndulla, named for Hera Syndulla, who at that point in Rebels was not a general. So that was something exciting to get. Also, we didn't know the fate of any of the characters. So we're like, oh, okay. Hera makes it through to the Battle of Yavin. And then this is just my favorite thing, because he's my favorite droid character. We actually see Chopper for a split second in the background. The droid from Rebels just kind of goes across the screen. It's not just that they were linking it forward to A New Hope, they were linking it backwards to Rebels and making it feel like a real integrated universe.
I was going to ask about this because I haven't finished Rebels, but Saw Gerrera's in Rebels. And I believe
Saw Gerrera,
is in Rebels, is exposed to some sort of like gas air poisoning thing, which explains why he then has all of the mechanics, and why at the end he says, "You run, I'm going to stay here," because he can't run because his health is out of it. He would hold her back.
So, by the way, Saw Gerrera, at this point, we need to start making a list of what Star Wars things he doesn't appear in, because that's going to be a shorter list than the ones he has appeared in. He's like the connective tissue right now.
Oh, that's super fun.
And that makes me happy because I love Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, it's great.
Also, one of the file names in so as a connection to Mandalorian, Clone War, and Star Wars Rebels, one of the file names was Black Saber. So like the dark saber. And as a nod to my enjoyment of the earlier movies not quite having the tech of the later movies, 2 of Saw Gerrera's men are playing some sort of chess-like game, which is the same figures as the hollow chessboard from A New Hope, from episode 4.
With the Wookiee? Let the Wookiee win that game?
Yeah, let the Wookiee win.
Yeah, that's fun.
So, RDY, let me ask you a question.
All right.
Would you be surprised to hear that this is not the first story in the Star Wars universe about how the Death Star plans were stolen?
I would not be surprised, but I'm intrigued.
So before Disney purchased Star Wars, there was a vast expanded universe that now we refer to as legends because they are not considered a part of the Disney canon. Disney, one of the things that they have done exceptionally well is unify the canon and make things weave and build off of each other in very intelligent ways. The way Rogue One connected not just to the original Star Wars, but to Rebels, I think is a great example of it. Us joking, but like actually Saw Gerrera appearing in so many important things is another great link. Before Disney purchased Star Wars, there was a vast expanded universe that all sought to tell the same stories. In one of those stories, Rebel pilot Kian Farlander is involved with stealing the Death Star plans. But we see that in the Star Wars X-Wing video game. But we also see that Kyle Katarn steals the Death Star plans. But we also see the Battle of Top Rawa, please correct me if I'm wrong, also involves stealing the Death Star plans. But we see in Star Wars Battlefront 2,
yeah.
Are you noticing a trend?
Top ramen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. The point being, and I'm going to quote, I'm looking at Wikipedia right now, and I'm going to quote Pablo Hidalgo, who is a delightful human being if you've ever looked him up. The quote from Pablo Hidalgo says, if you had to throw a dinner party and invite everyone who had ever stolen the Death Star plans, you'd be surprised at how many place settings you'd have to worry about.
Oh, that's hysterical.
That's awesome. That's a great line.
It got to the point that when people had to make sense of how many people stole the Death Star plans leading into A New Hope, they had to make stories of this person stole the plans, but then they lost it. So this other person had to go and find it, but the Empire was going after them. So they ditched the plans and it became a mess. There was too much commentary and it was conflicting with each other.
So they sort of fix that by making them the endpoint because it literally gets handed to Princess Leia at the end. I don't know if any of the other versions, the person hands the plans to Leia, because they could have stolen these plans lots of times and they just ended up back at Scarif stored in this protective database at the end, right? They could have stolen them in as many times as you want and gone back and said, oh, well, yeah, but before that one, this guy stole it from this place. And then it got taken back.
Yeah. So the way they dealt with it is I'm still referencing Wikipedia. The original Star Wars website article on the Death Star would acknowledge several of these people's contributions and would also kind of leave some things out. And one video game, Star Wars Empire at War, and this is a quote, attempted to resolve the issue by saying the Death Star plans were scattered to help keep them out of enemy hands, and that Katarn, Farlander, and all the others simply stole parts that, when pieced together, formed the Death Star plans. Now, as someone who loves the X-Wing series and adores the Dark Forces series, I have to say the story of Rogue One is a much more satisfying and unifying way to tell the story of the Death Star plans.
Yay. Nice.
I'm so glad.
Very cool.
So glad, because I don't know any of those other stories. So I'm so glad I'm so glad that was your tag. So I want to pull it back to
Judaism
as well.
I was just going to ask if we have a lot of, I know some Jewish people who listen, and sometimes they go, that was too nerdy for me. And they're going to say, I didn't really like that Rogue One episode too much. You guys just talked about a lot of things I don't know the names of. So,
what's a kashik? I guess that's also how people who don't speak Hebrew feel when they're talking to me. The concept of canon, we talk about it in the Nerdverse as like, what's canon in the Star Wars universe versus what did you call it, Ethan? The
legends.
The legends. That's a perfect parallel for Midrash. The things that are canon are the things that are in the sacred text, in the Torah, in Talmud, and in the basis of our Jewish life. Midrash are stories that enhance, I would say, those texts. And we're not beholden to just one. There are several stories of why the Israelites deserve to get Torah at Mount Sinai. So just like there are several stories about who stole the plans to the Death Star, we have multiple stories in Midrash about the same thing as well. And I'm hoping that each of you has a favorite Midrash that you might be willing to share with us.
That I didn't share on the Miriam episode? Let me think for one moment.
Okay. I can model good behavior and go first if you'd like.
Please.
Please be the great Jewish professional and go first.
And the problem is it's hard for me to find only one, but one of my favorites. So there's a difference in pronunciation in the same pair of words in Song of the Sea. In Hebrew, we say mi chamocha the first time that pair of words comes up, which means who is like you. And the second time we say exactly the same words, we say mi kamocha. Still means who is like you. There's no other difference except for the little dot that changes the chaf into a kaf. When I used to teach Hebrew, I called it a kaf drop. But that little dot,
and nobody laughed except you at that point.
That's okay. But that's a lot of my jokes.
That's hysterical.
That little dot that changes the pronunciation, that dagesh, has a midrash. So the question being, why is that dagesh there? And the answer is that is precisely the moment when the sea parted, because as the Israelites started marching into the sea, full of faith that God would save them, the waters slowly rose, but they started singing Song of the Sea anyway.
I was going to joke, is it the salt water in their mouth?
Right, that's it.
Yeah.
So as the water got up to their chin, and they said, because this pair of michamochas comes in pretty much the middle of the poem. So as the water comes up to their chin, and they say michamocha ba'elim Adonai, and then when the water goes into their, right as it goes into their mouth, mi ha'amocha, they're spitting out water right at that dagesh. And God said, these people are so faithful that they're going to be able to leave Egypt safely, that they're willing to walk through the water as water is getting in their mouths. Boom, I'm splitting the sea for them. So there's a midrash just for that dot.
I think for me, aside from the one I had shared in the Miriam episode, go back and check it out, episode 10. You reminded me that there is one that I enjoy. It's when Moses, and I think this is a midrash. I'm pretty sure it's a midrash. In the Torah, Moses lifts his staff and the sea separates. But I think, right, that there's a midrash that, what's his name?
Nachshon.
That Nachshon
ben Aminadav.
Yeah, walks into the water to show that he is the faith, even though the sea hasn't split yet. And when he says, who is like you, Adonai, our God? And when he goes and continues going, that's when the sea splits. That somebody has to take that first step and show that they have the faith for God to have said, you deserve to move forward in the promised land, as opposed to just Moses lifting his staff and saying, I have freed you from the land of Egypt. The people had to sort of do it themselves.
You know, it's
because multiple people can steal the Death Star plans.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
the same thing.
Yeah. No,
Is there another story besides Nachshon? Somebody else is like down at the other end of the sea, also walking into the water at the same time.
Yes, Stu.
That
guy. Nobody liked him. Nachshon was awesome.
I also was going to bring up Nachshon as my example. That's how I had the name right on my tongue. I was locked and loaded, ready to go.
So if you think of a midrash, Ethan, we'll cut it in.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any right? Because we talked about this. Ethan said that there's Rogue One had happened, but there had already been 35 people who've stolen the Death Star plans. Are there midrash with midrash that we have a story, and then maybe outside of midrash, there's another story that somebody had told to explain the midrash, and you just sort of go deeper and deeper, right? Like, I guess, awesome. Well, at the time of this recording, this one, folks, is only being recorded like a week before. And so when this episode airs, the final episode of Andor comes out, which is really like the midrash for part of Rogue One. And we can theorize, but we're gonna sound stupid when the episode comes out and we're all wrong about what's going on. But
I'd argue even more than Rogue One, but yeah, it does feel like commentary or additions to the addition.
Yeah,
I would say, though, it's not answering a question about Andor that I'm in the middle of the episode that is most current now while we record. So I can't think of a question it answers. I think it's more like, well, I guess this is a question of who is this Cassian guy and why is he so awesome?
Why is he captain? Right. I think the last episode will likely have us the question that we didn't know we needed an answer to from the get-go.
Well, I would say the most interesting question being answered isn't about Cassian Andor. For me, it's about Mon Mothma.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's about the rebellion for me. Like this feels like that he is the start of the break of the rebellion, right? That I don't, right? Granted, as I said, I haven't like fully seen the Rebels, but episodes 1, 2, and 3, there's no rebellion. There's the Jedi Order that still exists. And so then between there and Rogue One, a rebellion has to begin. And I think Andor is where that's going to really come out from, that there's all these, right? They talked about, hope you people are caught up. They talked about, this is even worse than RDY's 2-week notice. There's an episode where he talks to Saw Gerrera about like, well, you believe in this one, and there's this other group that's trying to do this thing, and there's like nobody's united doing anything, right? So they're not together yet doing anything. There's no big rebel.
That's more than 2 weeks by the time this episode comes out.
All right, cool, good. You people are safe. Yeah, but so Rabbi, are there other Midrash that have an additional story that somebody else wrote to explain those pieces?
I've been trying to think of one, and I'm coming up dry, but who knows? If I think of one, I'll tell it, and then we'll edit it in.
Are there other when I knew we were going to do Rogue One, I was trying to think what other properties in nerd culture do this, right? We got a little bit of the Harry Potter with the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, right?
Star Trek is starting to do that with the
like Lower Decks and
not even Lower Decks, because Lower Decks
isn't that the show where they go to a famous yacht and you watch the people who serve the rich people? Oh, that's Below Decks.
I believe that's Below Decks. For a while, there was a series they called Short Treks, and it was little just like fill in the gap sort of things. And so one of them led into the first season of Picard and explained like a little bit of what happened there. And they're doing a little bit of like trying to unify the universe with some crossovers. And so Star Trek is, I'd say they're dipping their toe into the water of minutia.
Midrash.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm wondering
Okay. Different ways to describe it.
I wonder if Marvel's going to dip, right? Because Marvel's just giving us other stories in the timeline, but they have yet to go back and like really explain maybe Black Widow, but do like a Midrash. But it really
totally would. If they had gone to Budapest, then it totally would have been Black Widow.
Right. But it really just feels like they've only done timeline stuff. But Disney now, Disney owns all these different properties we're pretty much talking about, except for Star Trek. But
I want to interrupt just for a second. Ethan, you started to bring up Mon Mothma, and then we got excited. So would you be so kind as to continue that thought?
Yeah, I'd love to. One of the things that I've been really excited about for Andor is filling in who is Mon Mothma. And we've got a lot from Legends. We've got a lot from, actually, Genevieve O'Reilly originally was cast to play Mon Mothma in episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, where we'd see the early beginnings of what would become the rebellion. All her scenes were cut. And this incredible thing, like over a decade later, she gets called to play that character again for real in Rogue One, and now is playing her in Andor. And we've had all these like teases or old legend stuff of who is Mon Mothma, but we've never answered the question really. And so Rebels did a little bit with her, and Rogue One did a little bit with her, but now we're finding out who she is. And again, some spoilers potentially, and knowing we're not at the end of the series yet, but like she is turning into this almost tragic character who appears like she is going to sacrifice everything for the cause of the rebellion. I mean, spoilers, but my assumption
people are going to hate this episode for so many different reasons.
Yeah,
and love it for others.
Yeah,
absolutely love it.
My assumption is that she loses her whole family, either due to her sister eating it and her daughter and husband disowning her. Like she is, I think, by the end of the series going to sacrifice her entire family in one way or the other, or lose her entire family for the cause of freedom for the galaxy and rebelling against the Empire. And it's tragic, it's well acted, it's emotional, it's incredible, and it fills in some really interesting things that we've never really known.
I don't know why.
Also tragic. Sorry, just
go ahead.
She's tragic. the like classic Mon Mothma line is a tragic line from episode 4, when she, like, the line that she's known for is many Bothans died to bring us this information. She's been focused on death since we've known her.
I don't know how I'm watching Andor, and I just rewatched Rogue One. And while I caught Senator Organa, Leia's dad, as like the same actor and stuff, it completely went over my head that Mon Mothma is the same character from Andor.
Yeah.
And I don't know how is she called something different?
No.
They don't use, I guess in the house she's just Mon.
Yeah.
Right? But they don't say Mon Mothma. They don't say, what is she called in the rebellion place? They call her.
Actually, I'm not even convinced her name is spoken in Rogue One. I think she's just a character who is there.
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm looking at pictures. Her haircut is slightly different between Andor and episode 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't believe that. I'm so glad you said that, because I can't believe I missed that connection between the two. That, like, Senator Organa, I caught that, and I did not miss this person I've been watching for 8 weeks when I rewatched Rogue One last week. I can't believe I missed it. But you might be right. That's awesome. They never say her name in the same way. That's what I think is happening. But very cool.
So the beauty of the concept of Midrash is that it keeps the door open to our sacred narrative. The whole purpose of Rogue One, as we mentioned, was to answer the question, how did the Empire allow for such a potentially fatal design flaw in their great weapon? The answer we now know is because someone put it there surreptitiously. Our sacred texts have holes in them that leave us asking questions. Why did God choose Abraham, as we mentioned? Why did the Sea of Reeds split, as we mentioned? There are others. Today, we're asking different questions than the ones the classic Midrashim answer. And we're very focused today on where are the silenced people in our texts, which has been famously answered by Anita Diamant in her book, The Red Tent from 1997. More recently, Rabbi Leah Berkowitz wrote an incredible midrash on the book of Esther called Queen Vashti's Comfy Pants, where she has the focus on Queen Vashti's party, where she's hanging out with her friends and she doesn't want to go dance in front of the king because they're in their comfy pants and they want to stay that way. And so he tells her to leave, and she's all too happy to go traveling the world with her friends, making power moves in their comfy pants. So yes. Yeah. In order to get our midrash,
I really hope somebody like Queen Vashti in the Sisterhood of the Comfy Pants.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. We'll talk to Rabbi Berkowitz hopefully someday soon.
Yeah.
And so in order to get our midrashim out there in the world and get people to really know it, we might have to be a Jon Favreau or Anita Diamant or Rabbi Berkowitz caliber. But that doesn't mean we don't have the right to tell our stories. The Torah is our story. And we can write the fan fiction that may someday be Midrashic canon.
That's cool. I like that. You know what the other piece is? I would say, this is going to be a little bit meta maybe, right? We have our stories, we live our stories. When we end up talking to our parents, to our grandparents, I feel like that's the same kind of midrash about how we got to where we are, because it's a story that's not specifically our story, but these side tertiary pieces explaining our family and how we got to this house, or how we got to have a sibling, or how, like, whatever happened in their lives affected our life very differently. I wish I thought of this while we were
cutting the ends off the roast.
Yeah. Yeah. So very fun.
I would say some of those stories, absolutely, but some of them also point to the fallibility of memory.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, but if you had records like these people are creating stories for these other pieces in the explanation, but I digress.
That's true.
Very fun. Awesome. Good. So that'll do it for this episode of Torah Smash. Our fiscal sponsor is Jewish Creativity International. Our theme music was created by Sean Fogel. You can check out Sean's bands and studio work at www.thesleepywest.com. This episode is supported in part by URJ 6 Point SciTech Academy. URJ 6 Point SciTech Academy is the only Jewish overnight STEM camp in the multiverse. At SciTech, their campers and staff dive deeply into their shared passions for science and technology in a warm and inclusive environment. If you love Torah Smash, you'll love 6 Point SciTech, where scientific inquiry meets fun. To learn more about joining URJ 6 Point SciTech Academy as a camper or staff member, go to 6pointscitech.org. We want to hear from you and continue today's nerdy discussion. Go to torahsmash.com to find where to connect with us online, purchase swag from our store, support us with a donation, find previous episodes, and more. And I find your lack of Jewish faith disturbing.
Merchandising, where the real money for the podcast is made.
Torah Smash the flamethrower.